Well, on behalf of the Diocese of Lafayette, Office of Marriage, Family, and Pro-Life Activities, and on behalf of Bishop Desautels, I want to thank you for being here and welcome you to this Diocese of Lafayette's Pro-Life Oratory Contest. My name is Trista Littell. I serve as Pro-Life Coordinator in the Office of Marriage, Family, and Pro-Life Activities. And our first place winner is Aleksandra Adams.
Did you know that homicide is the third leading cause of death for children aged 5 and under? Did you also know that your first year is when you're most likely to become a homicide victim, just after your teen and adolescent years? These are facts that I have gathered about infanticide, which according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary is the killing of an infant. However, infanticide is so much more than this. The book of Exodus says, "Shed not innocent blood." And by killing children, especially the young, whose blood is the most innocent of all humanity, we are doing just that. Today, I'm going to be discussing infanticide. I'll be presenting a rough history of infanticide, present some numbers that show just how tragic this happening is, and touch for a moment on the tragedy of female infanticide. If we want to work to prevent this tragedy from spreading further and end its existence on this earth altogether, we have to be aware of just how awful it is. Infanticide is usually committed by a parent or step-parent, and most often the mother of the child. Mothers of the children who commit the infanticide come from all socioeconomic situations, age groups, and racial statuses. But a study done in France in 2010 has come to the conclusion that these mothers all usually suffer from low self-esteem, lack of emotional maturity, and fear of abandonment. There are two types of infanticide, active and passive. Active infanticide is when the person who commits it has the intentions to kill the child, and they'll usually do so through head trauma, strangulation, and drowning. Passive infanticide is when the child's death isn't necessarily intended, but things such as starvation, and careless parenting can lead to the child's untimely death. It's not very easy to document infanticide because excuses such as stillbirths and sudden infant death syndrome can be used. Furthermore, some children aren't documented with the government when they are born, and so their deaths aren't noticed. You may be wondering, why would somebody want to kill a child? There are 6 main motives that I will be discussing today. Altruistic infanticide is when a mother kills her child out of love because she believes that the child's best interest is death. Acutely psychotic infanticide is when a mother kills her child because of psychosis-related reasons. Fatal maltreatment infanticide is when the child is neglected and abused to the point of death. Unwanted child filicide is just like it sounds. The mother doesn't want the child and believes he or she is a burden and therefore kills him or her. Spouse revenge infanticide is usually committed by the mother, and the motivation is purely to emotionally harm the partner. Sex-selective infanticide is when the child is killed because of his or her gender. I'll discuss female infanticide more later. There are some other reasons, which include population control, government policy, and beliefs derived from certain cultures. Infanticide itself has stretched over thousands of years. The British Broadcasting Corporation has reported that over the centuries, infanticide has been a top method to prevent poverty, starvation, and other issues associated with overpopulation. The Greeks and Romans usually wouldn't kill their children instantaneously. Instead, they would expose them to the elements with the hopes that they would be rescued by a kind traveler. And whether or not a child was to be exposed was often determined by a father figure in the family, such as a grandfather. Children with birth defects were more often killed than those who didn't have them. And in pagan Europe, exposure was very common as well, for the same exact reasons. During the Middle Ages, various cultures such as the Irish, the Gauls, and the Celts would all sacrifice their children to the gods. Or if they had birth defects, they would kill them because they believed these were derived from supernatural forces. In fact, infanticide was the most committed crime in Western Europe from the Middle Ages all the way to the early 19th century. In the Middle East, the Islamic religion has made infanticide illegal, but before this faith caught hold, infanticide was a very common form of postpartum birth control. Other reasons that children could be killed was sacrifice and fear of fatherly disapproval. In China, infanticide is notoriously popular due to the one-child policy that was established in 1979 and lasted for 35 years. This policy, like it sounds, restricted families to one child and was granted a major relaxation in 2013. It was later changed into a 2-child policy in 2016, but infanticide still is very popular in this area. According to wikigender.com, Infanticide is called mabiki in Japan, which means to pull plants from an overcrowded garden. It was most common in the early 19th and 20th centuries. In India, they would throw children into a river in order to sacrifice them. In 19th century England, it was so popular that both the lay and the medical press were discussing infanticide and how to prevent it. And even America hasn't been able to escape this tragedy. In fact, the United States is one of the top-ranking nations when it comes to infanticide. The English colonists brought it over and found that their Native American counterparts also participated. And as time passed, children were still extremely prone to the possibility of death. In Antebellum, Virginia, the mortality rate of children under the year of 1 age was 16 to 20%. And out of the 11,000 murders that were committed in the United States in 1966, 4.5% of those were children killed by their parents. Even though these numbers seem small, the fact that they're anything greater than zero is very devastating. Obviously, talking about the history isn't enough, so I've gathered some more numbers to prove just how tragic this is. According to encyclopedia.com, throughout history, 10 to 15% of all infants have been killed by their parents. And it doesn't just stop there. In the United States in 1983, over 600 children were reported killed by their parents, and from a 5-year period from 1982 to 1987, approximately 1.1% of all homicides in the United States was children. According to childtrends.org, 7 out of every 100,000 babies was killed due to infanticide just in 2016. Earlier I mentioned sex-selective infanticide. Male babies are killed more often in the United States, but pretty much everywhere else in the world, female babies are more often killed. This is because male babies are often viewed more desirable, since they usually grow up and go and make the money, while women stay at home and take care of the house. Also, some families in poverty didn't want to have to buy expensive wedding dowries for their daughters when they got married. The one-child policy also contributed to this. In the UN World Report on Violence Against Children, conducted among 1,000 women in India, determined that infanticide was the cause of the death of 41% of newborn girls. This is a tragedy and has gone just beyond being an issue. Infanticide is one of the most heinous crimes that can be committed from a Catholic standpoint. The Fifth Commandment says, "Thou shalt not kill," but by killing children, we are killing the most innocent of all human beings. Pope Francis said, "Life, once conceived, must be protected with the utmost care." And by failing to protect that gift, we are failing the children themselves. I hope that this short time has been enough to convince you that infanticide has gone past the point of just being an issue, and that we must stop at nothing to end it in this world. I thank you for your time and your ears, and I hope that you all have a great year.